I will be your shield in the fiercest battle. I'll defend you from all these arrows, and the sword I wield will keep you from danger. Let me be your shield.
Standard Bank continues its pursuit to contribute positively towards worthy causes. During this year's 16 days of activism against the violence perpetuated against women, we wonder what a financial institution can really do to lessen the effects of GBV and femicide. The answer is simple: financial assistance. Money, as you know, is a tool that's sadly often used to silence women and to prevent them from leaving abusive relationships. So today we'll talk about rebuilding life after GBV. I'm joined by a familiar face, psychologist, Dr. Bahari. Welcome. Thank you. Bandile Sileme, a drama therapist from Lawyers Against Abuse. It's so nice to have you with us today.
Pleasure.
And Dineo Zamela, a finance wunderkund. Welcome, Dineo. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Dineo and Bandile, money is a great resource in the right hands, but we also know it can be used against women. So how do we go about providing positive, practical, and immediate term solutions to women in GBV situations? Dineo, can it be done?
It absolutely can, but I think it's very important for us to understand that it's not a quick fix. Getting out of an abusive relationship is a very emotionally, it's a lot of work, and trying to deal with the fallout of, the financial fallout of the breakdown in the relationship is also a bit of a struggle. But I think the biggest thing, or the most important thing, is actually standing up and recognizing you need help and then seeking help. It can be intimidating to step out into the world and after that situation to say, I need help to recover. But, addressing and going to creditors and getting that support system in place to just help you figure out where are you, but also standing yourself, taking that, an assessment of your financial situation, going through the statements, because a lot of the time what you find is you're in debt because of an abusive situation. Somebody has taken advantage of you. They've restricted your, your ways of getting income. They've meddled with your work, your career, your academics, all of these things seemingly unrelated to finances, but they do end up having a very big impact on your finances because it's a way of controlling your access and, ways to get into a better position financially. So assessing your situation, getting a very clear understanding of this is what it's like, this is what my credit is like, these are the debts that I have, and then reaching out to the institutions that you have the relationships with and saying, I need help. You don't have to tell them your life story. You just need to be clear that I am in a bit of a bind and I just need some time to get myself together.
So Bandile, that's a story from the bank's perspective.
Yeah.
You see a different kind of perspective. You see the fragility. You see the broken woman who has yet to discover that she does still have enough strength left in her to go and follow the steps that need to be followed. So where do you start?
I think particularly from my side, coming from NPO, which focuses on legal rights, I think this is a social justice issue and also a human rights issue. So why I'm saying that is about access at the end of the day, right? So putting certain hurdles in front of women, making it very difficult. And also, apart from those hurdles which are in the system, then you also find sociocultural factors that play a role. For example, if you are a woman and you are married, you are supposed to take care of your children. And if you keep on working, then you are perceived in a different way. So because also you want to belong in a community, you want to feel part of your family. So slowly you start letting go of those things because you start sitting in that role of becoming the mother and you can't actually access the other different roles. So by the time when you actually want to leave this abusive relationship, it's so difficult because you find yourself in a corner. But also apart from that, when I'm speaking about access, particularly you coming from a financial institution, is that also those environments, they should be accessible and they should be friendly towards women. Why I'm saying that, because I remember there was one time when I had a session with males, and they actually asked me a question like, yeah, it's actually understandable why women don't work in construction. And I was like, no, actually, they can work in construction. It's just that the environment is not conducive for a woman, especially when you're an outsider trying to put your foot on the ground, trying to get people to see you, constantly being harassed, constantly people using every single excuse about your gender. So it makes it impossibly difficult for anyone to actually try and access those things, because before you actually access them, you need to prove that you're worthy to actually be given that service.
Now that takes us back to you, Dineo. This problem with women having access to finance and having access to a whole world of benefits that men have goes back a long time. Remind us when it was that women were first allowed to even open their own bank accounts.
It's very shocking because it was not that long ago. 1980s. If you were a married woman, you could not open your own bank account. And, it seems ridiculous now, but back then it was still very widely accepted. And, we've definitely moved on, but there's still, especially in dynamics where, there's a massive power shift between partners. It is very difficult for women. They might have a bank account, but it might be a joint bank account. They don't have access to savings. If you're a stay-at-home wife, you probably have a husband who wants to control everything, who makes you account for every penny, but never has to, explain what they're doing with their money. But, if you need to save money or put money aside, it is very challenging. You might have, and sometimes we think it's a poor woman. She might have everything, but everything sits, and the power of the big car, the beautiful house sits with the husband. And every time she tries some form of just independence, trying to gain independence, those things are used as a threat mechanism, as a control mechanism. If you try this, you're going to lose all of this. And so, the ways in which institutionally, we're seeing shifts, we have more access, but, the information, the actual being able to go out, seek the help, and do it in such a way that you don't put yourself in danger, because that's the other thing, right? If somebody is being financially abusive, they're very likely, actually, it goes hand in hand emotionally, and sometimes then it escalates, or violence is a part of it. And, you always think, I want to get out of the situation. I want to go and get my life in order. But there's always the very real threat that this could be a very real life and death situation for me.
And that predicament brings itself into your office, and you're left to deal with.
Yes, because what Dineo is saying is that maybe policy and structure has changed and the law has changed. So now you don't have to have your husband's permission to open a bank account. But what takes longer to change is the worldview and the belief system of the individual. So if, as a man, the government may allow you now, or law may allow you to open a bank account, but it's that entrenched belief system that no, but I am still in charge. I am in charge of the money as the man in the family, and all the money has to go through me. So even though the policy has changed, sometimes on a personal level, the belief system has not changed yet, and that takes many years.
It's incredible, 2021, and we're sat with these things. So, Dineo, what about short to long-term financial recovery? We're talking about bonds, investments, that kind of thing.
So again, I'm going to go back to the point around having as much information as you can possibly garner. And I think, one of the things we just touched on was there's policies and things that might have changed, but there's so many people, for instance, who get married in community of property, having no idea what they're getting into. And it's a lack of education, because you don't understand the financial implications for this. And whenever you bring up things like prenups, people think, oh my goodness, you're testing my love, but I love them, I don't want, money is not a problem. But actually, don't think of it as love and money, cannot coexist, or it's mutually exclusive. It's a form of protection. You might not have anything, but a prenup is exactly the thing that might just save you, So it's very important that you find a way to educate yourself. And if you are already married in community of property and you're already in a dire financial situation, try and get some legal help. And I'm sure there are organizations and there are ways for you to just see what avenues do I have to actually protect myself. And I'm going to go back again. Don't be afraid to go to the financial institutions and the creditors that you owe and tell them, I am in a tricky situation. I need a month, 2 months, 3 months, however long, to just get myself in order. But do that having had a solid-ish plan. And I know sometimes when the situation is dire and you need to get out very fast, there is no time to think about a solid plan. But if you can, and if you are in a position to just start building, see, how do I get my credit score to where it is? A lot of the times, you have partners who will make the woman, go out to get credit cards and things like that, and then they max them. But when that same woman wants to do something for herself, she's subjected to 21 questions and
Re-traumatized.
re-traumatized. And it's like, it's my money, this is my credit, but your partner has no issue going out and spending your money and putting you in a very dire financial situation and then leaving you a lot of the times in that mess. So it does become very important to just try and figure out a way. It's financial, it's your bank accounts, it's your credit cards, but it's your career as well. Financial abusers will usually also try to sabotage any attempt you make to just move forward. And so it becomes very important. Know where you are, understand where you are. If you can get, assistance from a psychologist or lawyer, if you're in a fortunate position to have access to that, get the help you need and, start building towards that. But also understand it's not going to happen overnight.
Particularly looking at the other side, there's another side that possibly for me, when I started practicing in Deep Suit, that I was completely unaware of. There's a substantial number of people who are undocumented, who don't have IDs, right? So even particularly when we're speaking particularly about someone who is married, obviously they have documentation. So when you don't have a documentation, you don't even exist. So it's virtually even impossible for someone to even leave that abusive relationship because you don't have the resources to even put your life together. And it's not only particularly South Africans. We also have some people from other African countries coming here. So then even when they then decide, I'm going to leave, their partner then threatens them with that. It's like, you're going to leave. Remember, you are nothing without me. So it's also when you find certain men who prey on certain women, and they know there's most probably certain places that you can find these women that most probably are vulnerable, and you can actually, in a way, exploit them and oppress them until you're done.
And is it not true then, Doc, that these women who are sought out specifically by these men are then left feeling as though they've brought it upon themselves? But they haven't.
No, they haven't. They're a vulnerable community that is preyed upon. So sometimes abusers know who to target. And no, they haven't brought it to themselves, because when you enter into these relationships, it's always in a framework of love and support and in the beginning. And it takes amount of time to get to the space. So sometimes you don't see it coming. And sometimes even if it comes at you too quickly, you are left in a state of shock and denial in the beginning. This cannot be happening and it will change. And I should have done this, or maybe if I do this. So there's so many facets of gender-based violence to get through and to wade through before you can even decide, maybe I should leave. And even when you that thought enters your head, then it's like, but how do I leave? And everything Bandile and Dineo have been saying is that there's so much factors against you that it becomes an almost impossible task. And that suits a perpetrator.
You see, we talk about under-resourced women, zero-resource women, and resourced women. Is the difficulty in leaving almost equal for all of them because there's a psychological thing at play here?
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily easier for a resourced woman to walk away.
Yeah. Ms. Perry, I think from my side, because when we're speaking about GBV, we're talking about what you've said, particularly shame and guilt, right? So you've got someone who's constantly blaming themselves for something that they they didn't even expect or didn't think it would happen to me. An example that I usually tell people is like, sometimes we take certain things that we do for granted. Like me coming here in the studio, I didn't think that I was going to most probably get into an accident, right? And also particularly when we speak about the financial aspect of it, it reminds me, particularly with the younger ones, there's some element of grooming and collusion that happens, right?
Yes.
Because he pampers you with stuff, he shows you stuff, he buys you a big house, right? And he loves you, right? And also the other thing is that one of the research that I also read is that it takes almost 7 attempts for a woman to leave an abusive relationship, right? So you try to leave. And already you spoke to your family, and your family is like, okay, so we'll put certain resources. That's if you have a family, right? And then now, because you realize that actually, as you say, the complexity of trauma is that as much as this person is actually perpetuating all of this thing against you, but there's also another aspect, the grooming aspect, that you really enjoy, right? And also because because of the shame and the guilt, it's so difficult for you to express it. And then by the time also when you try to then leave, you're also thinking like, my family or my friends, they knew about this. They've been trying. And also, as I said, particularly about those 7 attempts, and also the same thing even in our centers, we see a lady coming through and then she goes, I would like a protection order. And then she gets assisted with a protection order. Or when she has to go for a hearing because the partner then uses that financial resources, then she doesn't go, right? And then because of that shame and the guilt, it's virtually also impossible for her to then come. So it's also about us being intentional also and being compassionate to people and understanding that actually this is your journey. Once you've figured it out, once you've reached a certain point and you've decided, actually, I just want to leave now, then you will leave. And that's why I remember even in our organization, one of the things that we speak about, this whole idea that we can empower people. No, we can't. People empower themselves, right? It's about self-determination and autonomy of that individual. So if they decide to then go back, you need to understand it's not your story. It's not your process. It's their process and their journey. And then when they actually made up, and you can see it clearly when a woman or a woman with children, when she's finally made that decision that I'm going to leave, there's a certain kind of aura. And also in her eyes, you know exactly like now she needs to go. With others, we know, okay, she's here, most probably she's still trying to figure out. Because also the other thing that we haven't spoken about is that you then have to subject yourself in that legal process, whereby you find a police officer who is of the same view that you are a woman, you are supposed to be put in your place. Or sometimes you find a police officer and go like, no, man, you should be understanding of your husband. Just give him another chance. Does he drink? No, just tell him that he needs to go to Sanka and do other things. So it's not actually about whether you resource or you're under-resourced. It's also that psychological impact that plays on every individual. And it's because of the shame and the guilt, which makes everyone to be silent about the subject matter. We all know of someone who is a victim or a survivor. But strange enough, when we have to talk about it, it's like, no, I don't know anyone. And sometimes it's in your family. And we turn a blind eye.
So, Doc, let's speak to that woman now. Speak to her and give her a pointer. Encourage her.
I think what Bandile said that is so important is that as a society, what we do is the first question we ask when we hear that somebody's being abused, why doesn't she leave? Why is she staying? And then when they try to leave and they go back, it's like, but you knew and you went back. So there's a lot of blame and victim shaming. And then it becomes very difficult. That just adds on it. And then you go through the system and the system fails you, and that's secondary trauma. So I think it's very, very important as healthcare providers and as the public to understand this is not it's not an event. You don't just wake up one day and decide, I'm leaving today. It is a process. And through that process, our role as therapists or as a financial institution is to give you the stepping stones, because the first path you take may not lead you out. It gives you a stepping stone of a positive experience that, I know this now. So maybe I can stay a while, but if I want to go, I have access to this information. So we need to understand that as a society and as individuals. Leaving an abusive relationship is a pathway, it's a stepping stone, and we need to make allowances for that instead of blaming and judging.
So we're saying to the women in particular who are watching this, we're not judging you. We want you to just take note of all the steps that we're trying to put before you to give you the power in your hands, that when you're ready, you take that power and then you leave. Bandile, access to your type of help, is it easily and readily available?
Unfortunately, it's not, right? And that's the other aspect, particularly about our profession, is that in order for you to access us, you need to be financially stable and
Yes.
secured, right? And I think, particularly for me, that's the reason why I took an intentional decision whereby I'm not going to work within the private sector, I'm going to work in the public sector, right? And then, particularly then, when you then, because I mean, all of the clients that I come across, there's no way that I would have been able to see them. So it comes back again to that financial aspect of it. So it's also making sure that as much as, even with my colleagues, also I'm trying to appeal to their conscience is that as much as you are in private practice, it's also about trying to do some pro bono cases. Because also the other thing is that even as a country, we don't pay so much attention on mental health. And also the other thing that we also neglect to do is that we stop also to acknowledge particularly the cultural aspect of it. Because most of the time when people, when they come to see me, especially in the community, because the perception is that therapy is for white people, right? So also if then I'm going to access the service that wasn't actually built or meant for me when it was actually built, then I'm also alienating myself even further from my own community. And like I said, the fundamental need that we all have as human beings is the need to belong.
To belong, to be heard, to be seen as a full person. There's so much that we can go into. I'm almost hearing some women watching this going, just give me steps, just somewhere to start. What is a first step to take?
I think, like we mentioned before, I think that what we need to understand, it is a process. So first, when you decide, you know what, maybe I should leave this, start having a plan. You don't have to leave immediately. Start looking at what your resources are. Go to your financial institution, speak to somebody. If I need a payment holiday, if I need this, what are the steps to go about doing it? If I need to leave my house in an emergency, where can I go? So there are organizations like FAMSA, People Against Women Abuse, Childline. So have resources. Know that if I need to leave, oh, I can go there. What is their process? How long can I stay there? And also to speak to your family. So you can access government institutions, private psychologists in government, hospitals, social workers, nurses, all of those things, but also to speak to your immediate social support. Most times what happens in abuse is that it suits the perpetrator to alienate the person that they're abusing, because then the abuse stays secret and then they can get to do what they need to do. And on the other hand, it's hard for victims or people who are are in violent situations because they're ashamed or embarrassed or think their family wouldn't understand or judge them, and they don't want to tell anyone. Also, you live in this fairy tale. You want your marriage to look like how you thought it was going to look. So you don't want to admit that it's not working out like that. So that suits the situation, and you stay in this bubble with the victim, the perpetrator. So it makes it harder. So the first step, try to talk to your family. Let them in a little bit. Test the waters out. Say that, you know, we've had this problem, and see how they say, and they may be very supportive. So there are lots of spaces that you can go to, but the point is have a plan first. Try to research, try to see, and don't feel bad that I am abused. Why am I not just walking out? Like I said, it's not an event. It does take a while.
I know my leg is broken. Why doesn't it just move? It's the same kind of thing, right?
It's exactly the same kind of thing. And I love the fact that we've brought in that cultural and social element. I always say, you know, the culture of begezela, which is the culture of perseverance, that we instill and, you know, we insist on in a lot of our home situations, contributes to this fear of leaving, because it's not just, you know, the danger of it, it's the sense of failure, you know, it's the shame for allowing a particular, you know, that violation of your mind, your body, your money. But then it becomes the shame of failing at something that society still in 2021 judges you by, the ability to keep your house in order. And it's such an interesting dynamic, because whenever we think about financial abuse, right, we think about the disenfranchised woman, the woman who's poorer than her husband, but then there are very financially secure women who are in these situations, and they stay because of the fear of failure. I've accomplished this. I have a master's degree. I'm a high-flying executive. I've got the salary. I've got the position. I've got the experience, the world view, and everyone looks up to me. How could I possibly fail at marriage? And that's exactly what an abuser needs. That hook factor to say, if you leave here, you'll be a failure, and it's this chipping away psychologically, and it just fills every little crack of your life, that regardless of how well off you are financially, you could have the best resources. Getting out of an abusive relationship is difficult. It is not easy.
Isn't it sad that GBV is almost a playing field leveler? It really, it's disgustingly sad. So to the under-resourced woman, or the woman who is maybe in middle management, working her way up to middle management, but she's lost so much money through the GBV and everything that's come with it, is there hope for full financial recovery? Dare she even hope?
There is hope, but we've said this, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be quick. It's not something that's going to happen in 3 months or a month or even a year.
Yeah.
I mean, if we think about anyone who's just been out of an abusive situation, just in debt, you've dug yourself into a hole. Digging yourself out is very difficult. Now you can imagine debt because of somebody else, debt because you're in this financial situation because somebody has restricted access, has been controlling you, has gotten you fired, because abusers will do that. They've just played all the dirty tricks to really keep you right there in the space where they need you. Trying to figure out, where do I go if I haven't had a consistent employment history because somebody's been sabotaging this? I haven't been able to complete my degree because somebody throws my books out, burns them. Whenever it's time for me to study, they insist that I do everything but study, take care of me. They want to be babied. And, again, insidious ways that people interfere with your life and you don't realize what's going on. And sometimes I don't even think they are fully aware, but they also know, if I let you get this degree, that's it.
You're
If
gone.
you get this promotion, that's it. If you move forward and there's a gap,
You're going to take
you're
it.
gone, and I'll lose that control. It's control. It's, wanting to have power and wanting to have control. And because of the insidious nature of financial abuse and how it plays out, it is very difficult. But once you've sort of picked up the signs, the sabotage, the control, the always wanting to, what did you do with the money? Or if it's the other way around and you're the one with the money, the lack of accountability. I don't have to tell you what I've done. I don't have to tell you where I've been. I don't have to tell you why 15,000 Rand is missing from your credit card. Those things, if you started spotting those patterns, then again, start coming up with a plan.
So, Doc, that slow boil that works its way up to full-blown abuse, what does it actually look like for a woman who is maybe completely unaware that she is being financially abused as well?
I think Dineo touched on so much of it, but financial abuse, there's so many factors of it. The most direct one is that there's a control of money. So it's a direct control by one partner over the other on their money. But also it is the control of information and the access to financial information, not sharing your bank accounts, not sharing how much you spend on a certain thing, not sharing daily expenses and things like that. All of those things have financial abuse because it's not a joint partnership. And those are the things that keep you in an abusive relationship. And I think, it goes even beyond that, because sometimes abuse doesn't look like abuse. So sometimes, and I've seen it in my sessions, is that no, my husband doesn't like that I work. And I'm like, why? It's because, no, he just wants the best for our baby and he wants the mother to be there with the baby. And I will do it for like a few years until our baby is ready to go to school. So, or it looks like, no, my husband doesn't like that I work. You know, when I was working in this environment, there were so many men and they were rude and they were looking at me and he's trying to protect me. He doesn't want me to go through that. So it's best that I stay at home and it's okay. He gives me an allowance. So financial abuse is not straightforward. It is insidious. And it comes as a, I'm protecting you. And so many women out there say, yes, he is. He loves me and he's looking out for my best interest. But my question is, okay, in all of that, say you took all of that into account, but you have decided, you know what, I hear you. I hear all of those things, but I choose to work. For example, I want to put my child in daycare, or my mom will look after the child, or we'll get a nanny. If you decide that you want to work, can you? And the woman is, yeah, I'm sure if I push it. And I'm like, okay, go and have that conversation with your partner. See if you can. And oftentimes they come back and they say, no, actually, he put his foot down. He said, I'm not allowed to do it at all. So that's the picture of financial abuse.
And maybe just to add something, particularly the cultural element that comes into it, right? Because also, if you are financially independent as a woman, you are perceived as a threat to men. So sometimes you would find women downplaying their achievements so that the men, they don't feel too intimidated by them. So even when you meet this guy, because you've had a series of relationships that didn't work out and you wanted to work, and also the reason why we wanted to work is not because we adults, it actually starts off as children when we play. Because when we play mother and father. It's not about you being the executive. Yes, that's where it starts, right? And when a certain girl then steps out of line and decides, actually, I want to be a fire personnel. It's like, no, you can't. Girls don't do that. And also because recently we just completed an ECD intervention and we could actually see it in 5 and 6 year olds, whereby they had to do role play. And this intervention was about bullying, whereby you would find a girl then decides that, actually, I'm going to be a soldier. And then the entire group looks at her as like, no, you can't. And then she asks, why can't I? No, because you're a girl, right? And then the thing is that when you start challenging all of that, and then as much as maybe you do have an understanding partner, but the thing is that when you marry, especially in the African culture, you don't marry an individual, you marry an entire family. So when you go to family gatherings, as much as your partner is very understanding that, no, you can do that, and then you do that in front of the entire family, then they call him out and they say, you're not a man, you're weak, right? So then it also makes it very difficult. And I mean, everybody does not want to be constantly subjected into difficult situations. We want our lives to be easier, less drama, less turbulence. So then at some point you also go like, you know what, let me play along.
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it because actually what's really worth it, which is the idea that was sold to us as children, is that family is the ideal.
And know your place.
Yeah.
Yes. But also to add to that, it's that, studies have shown, you think that if a woman is a breadwinner and financially stable, that she would be able to leave. But studies have shown that breadwinners also do not leave if they're female, because there's other factors like cultural and religious factors that keep you, because your culture says, no, it can't be that bad. Stick it out. What would people say if you divorced? Your religion says it's a taboo. You do not get divorced. And one of the big things that women say to other women, at least it's not that bad for you. In my day, we had to do that. And then as soon as you say that, you are minimizing a problem. So you can be the breadwinner of your family, but there's many, many other factors that contribute to you staying, like we've said,
So let's wrap this up and let's encapsulate steps that women can take to lean into their financial institutions for help in getting out of this.
Absolutely. Be prepared to have honest conversations about your money. Be prepared to go out and talk and say, I am in a dire financial situation. If you're somebody who maybe isn't in a, you're okay financially, but so much of your finances are still tied with your partner, go out and get the legal assistance and, speak to the financial planner, because we've spoken about the powerful, well-off woman who still struggles to leave the situation and still is subject to financial abuse because yes, she's got the executive title, but the husband still controls everything. The husband makes sure that all the portfolios and all the investments are done. Have a clear understanding. Ask the questions that you need to ask as well. That access to information. What's going on? Can I see it? And the moment you realize I can't, then you start preparing. Start saving, start putting some money aside. It doesn't have to be a lot, just some. Start working your way out of debt. It also doesn't have to be a big event. Just start somewhere. Speak to the financial advisor. Standard Bank, for instance, they have a debt recovery or a debt assistance program. Go in there, because within that program, there's lovely resources to help you restructure your finances and, work around your debt, pay some of it off. And, we come up with a plan, we sit you down and, it's a very sound plan that is very aligned to what money is coming in, what your responsibilities are. So having that clear picture, taking those steps, and then educate yourself. If your husband or your partner doesn't allow you or doesn't give you access to information, the internet is beautiful. It is big. It has a lot of information. It also has a lot of community as well. So go to seek those people out. If it's difficult to find them physically, it's difficult to go out because questions, where have you been, whatever. There are online communities, there are resources. Seek them out, find them, and use them. Ask the questions that you cannot ask your partner because you fear that backlash.
Legally, where does the woman start?
From me, like you say, the plan, particularly that plan is a safety plan, right? And it's also acknowledging, particularly leaving, it's a process. So sometimes with that, actually, I'm thinking of leaving, but not yet. But by the time you've conducted this session or this consult, you know that this woman is not safe. And especially the children are not safe. So it's about trying to figure out what is a safety plan. And I think one of the difficult things that I have to do, particularly in my work, is having to talk to little kids about a safety plan. Is that when daddy then starts doing this, because it's my mom that's being beaten up right now. And as a child, I want to protect my mother. So sometimes you find a little child actually trying to intervene between the two parents. So it's about also making them aware, like, you little. So most probably what you might need to do is to go to the neighbor's place, right? And to ask for assistance. But then it becomes sort of like a difficult situation, especially in Deep Sleuth where we work, especially in certain extensions, whereby one, there's no power. So even when the child then decides, actually, now I'm going to go and seek out assistance for my mother, it's dark. She's a girl, right? So most probably she's moving from the pot into the fire. So it's about actually ensuring that there's a safety plan. And then once then you get the impression, particularly from this woman, that actually I want to leave. So there's various options available for an individual. One of the options that seems more likely to be taken by our clients is to then get a protection order. So you still stay with your partner in the same house. It's just that now legally you've got a document that states to him that he can't actually assault you in the home. And then there's another process that you can then do, whereby if you then decide that actually I want to leave, but then you've realized you've actually been alienated from your friends, your family, everyone else. You don't have anywhere to go. So you need to be placed in a shelter. But then now, because of the shelter, we don't have a lot of shelters in the country. So it's also making sure that those are being accessed by a certain individual who we know that they will then carry through that process. That most probably, even with that shelter that's offering sort of like a home to an individual, that this individual is not going to be coming 7 times to them. So then to also ensure that is to actually then you need to open a criminal case. And most of our clients, when we bring up, or when the legal program or the legal officers, they bring up that idea, they don't want to do it. Right? Because also when you do it, is that also you understand that you're going to be subjected to a very difficult process, right? You're going to meet an officer who's going to be asking you questions about the intimacy, about certain things that you're ashamed of, that you feel guilty of, right? And most of the time, even when you're being questioned, even when you do have a consultation with a legal officer or somebody from the court, they need to make sure that your story adds up. And sometimes you also feel like you're being attacked. right? So it's also difficult. And also the other thing is that the financial aspect of it is that then, okay, so I'm going to open a case against him. He's going to get arrested and he is our breadwinner. So then what's going to happen to us? Because also currently I do have a couple of cases whereby a mother used to stay particularly in a house, and now the husband has been arrested because of GVV. So then now they had to move into an informal settlement. The children also need to navigate particularly this new world because they're not used to it. They had access to certain things. So there's also like resentment, there's anger, there's all that stuff. So then at the end, that's why it becomes so virtually impossible for an individual to then leave. But there are options available. And also I've seen, particularly when I spoke about the protection order, I have seen women who've actually taken charge and went like, I'm going to get this protection order granted. I'm going to go to my hearing. I'm going to make sure that this happens. Even sometimes you find even a mother standing up and going like, no, it's not actually only about me, it's also about my children. So sometimes it's about trying to frame it in a different way to also make her understand that it's actually bigger, but it is possible to then leave. But then also what we've been trying to do, particularly as an organization, because we also understand particularly the system is overwhelmed. Because trauma is, I think in South Africa, if you meet someone who hasn't experienced trauma or GBV, they are extremely lucky. So the system is overwhelmed already. So it's also particularly from our organization to take sort of like an ethical stand, whereby we say, we acknowledge that our stakeholders are overwhelmed. So what we're going to do is that we're going to offer them certain support, like wellness sessions, so that they can also get in a process or in a session whereby they can also deal with their own shame, because then it becomes easier then to be more compassionate, to be more empathetic to another human being. Yes, there are issues in the system, but then also it's about us as individuals, as also as professionals, making certain decisions that actually I want to be a solution rather than constantly talking about the problems that are happening right now.
Yeah. Then, Doc, speak strength to the women, because we're trying to tell them that they do have options, they can leave. So in speaking strength to those who want to get out of that situation, where do they start when it comes to you?
I think what we have to recognize is that when you're in this process, it has been years and years of it. So you will have psychological issues. You will be traumatized. So you will have PTSD or acute stress disorder. You will suffer from depression and anxiety, and there will be physical ailments that you suffer because of years and years of stress and anxiety that goes with being physically abused, financially abused, emotionally abused. So first thing is try to recognize that in your state, you are not functioning at your best. So you cannot just get up and do everything that you need to do. We are here to help. There are steps that you can start doing. So in finding strength, recognize that, like you said, if you have a foot that is not working, you can't just run a marathon. You've got to attend to that foot first before you, and then train it even before you attempt the marathon. It's the same thing here. Look at your needs, look at your psychological needs, recognize when you can get help, and then start to put the steps in process that gets you to a space that one day you can leave.
It can be done. Beauty from ashes, cliched, but it has been done. Today was about helping women take back control and flourish beyond their GBV experiences. We may be a long way from eradicating the issue, but there is hope. There are willing ears to hear her voice, and there is access to help. Thank you so much for your time, ladies. You have been superb. We could actually talk for like another 6 hours. And thank you also for that much needed expert advice on the Standard Bank Hear Her Voice Blue Space conversation. Such an important matter for us to be talking about that affects women.
Absolutely.
As a bank, Standard Bank will do what it can in its financial corner to encourage and enable women to be heard when it matters most. Of all the challenges that we're faced with, silencing of women should not be one of them. I'm Ursula Chigani. Take care.